Hello, everyone. A couple weeks ago, I posted a video in response to Johnny Chang, whose original video title made the claim, "What 666 really means." My response was to break down his logic and to point out what 666 does not really mean. For those in the comments who said, "But what does it really mean?" I heard you. Let me be honest. I loathe these kinds of conversations. And if you know me well, you know that I love Bible study and scriptural discussions. So, why do I hate the topic of who is the Antichrist and what does 666 actually mean? Well, because they so quickly devolve into extra biblical speculation, prophetic politicking, and cringy speculation. So, what you're going to get from me today will be a very level headed academic overview, and I'm just going to try to answer some questions. So, first, who is the Antichrist? I feel this is the wrong question to ask, and Scripture tells us why. First off, 1 John 2:18 says that there are many antichrists. Verse 22 clarifies that the one who denies the Son and therefore denies the Father is Antichrist. Now, the concept of assigning a specific person to this role hasn't come from nowhere. In Daniel chapters 7, 8, and 11, there are passages that speak of a blasphemous and prideful figure. Ezekiel 38 and 39 speak of a chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. In 2 Thessalonians, he's referred to as the man of lawlessness. When modern people speculate on who is the Antichrist, it's because they want to use the identification of that figure as a trigger event for the return of Messiah. If they're right about so-and-so, then that means that they can set the doomsday clock and start getting ready. But is that what Scripture says to do? I feel like I shouldn't have to point out the neither the day nor the hour argument, so why don't I just go ahead and read it with the verse that follows. Mark 13, 32 and 33 say, "But concerning that day or the hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, only the Father. Be on guard, keep awake, for you do not know when the time will come." If you're under the impression that you need to identify the Antichrist so that you can know when you really need to start paying attention, you're missing something majorly important. You're not identifying the enemy before you go out to your post. You man your post so that you might spot the enemy. You should always be vigilant, alert, and working for the kingdom. Antichrist or no Antichrist. There is a spirit of the Antichrist that has persisted throughout time. It's not really about knowing who he is or who he was. It's more about knowing who he may be. Many figures have arisen to accomplish the same purpose of oppression and eradication among the Jewish people. Those familiar with Purim are likely familiar with Haman, having come in the spirit of Amalek, sent to destroy the Jewish people. We could assign this to Pharaoh, to Herod, to Hitler, and as it says in the Passover Haggadah, it was not only one man who rose up to destroy us. In every single generation, people rise up to destroy us, but the Holy One, blessed be He, rescues us from their hand. Okay, so let's talk about Nero. Even those at the time of Nero recognized that he was a puppet of the Antichrist spirit. His targeted persecution against believers, his executions, his conquests against Jerusalem, not to mention his own degeneracy and depravity, which he promoted throughout Rome, his philosophy in life was so twisted. He didn't believe that anyone could be virtuous. He only believed that that was something that someone might do out of an option of self-gain. So, early believers could not freely say or write something that would implicate them as enemies of Rome. Letters had to be written in codes and with symbolism, and Revelation in particular does this a lot. Revelation 17:9, for example, refers to the 7 heads that are on the 7 mountains on which the woman sits. If you want, Google the 7 hills of Rome. It was a well-known feature of its geography. Revelation speaks of Rome in the form of Babylon, and it speaks of Nero as the beast. This is supported by writers who were contemporaries of John. Philostratus wrote in Life of Apollonius 4:36-40, "Moreover, In traversing more of the earth than any man has visited, I have seen hosts of Arabian and Indian wild beasts. But as to this wild beast, which many call a tyrant, I know not either how many heads he has, nor whether he has crooked talons or jagged teeth. In any case, though, this monster is said to be a social beast and to inhabit the hearts of cities. Yet he is also much wilder and fiercer in his disposition than animals of the mountain and forest. That whereas you can sometimes tame and alter the character of lions and leopards by flattering them, this one is only roused to greater cruelty than before by those who stroke him, so that he rends and devours all alike. Even after Nero's death, based on proclamations made by the Sibylline oracles, people believed that Nero would rise again and deceive the world, just as Revelation 13:3 speaks of the beast whose fatal wound was healed. Revelation 13:18, here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. First of all, let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. We are not talking about Monster Energy drinks. We're not talking about leaving a penny behind because they gave you $6.66 and change. Superstitions will get us nowhere. Second, it is the number of a man. This is where we're given allowance to assign the number to a person. Fine. Many have felt that John was identifying Nero in code, using Hebrew Gematria by doing a transliteration between the Greek Neron Caesar spelling that adds up to 666, or by equating it with the Latin spelling which adds up to 616, which is the number that appears in certain Revelation manuscripts. Many have said, okay, 666 equals Nero. But this interpretation has its criticisms. One, Greek to Hebrew Gematria can be a bit sticky. Two, the transliteration doesn't even seem to be quite accurate. Transliteration means that I'm using one alphabet of one language to write out something spoken in a different language, like the madness around spelling Hanukkah, right? Bottom line, if you say Hanukkah when you read the English, that's all anyone really needs. So if I wanted to write Neron Caesar, I actually would need to add in the letter Yud for the I part in order to render it accurately. But that spelling then would change the Gematria count to 676, not 666. Again, like I mentioned before, some of the manuscripts record 616, something that people have said counts because if we drop the Neron part and make it Nero again, then that's accurate against the Latin name versus the Greek, and it still works. I explained a little in my video a couple weeks ago that the numerical symbolism in Hebrew contributes to some of the way that people interpret 666. Revelation tells us that 666 is the number of a man. So when people hear that 6 in Hebraic number symbolism is the number of man, they think they're on to something. I went into this in the last video, so I'll overview it quickly. 6 carries with it symbolism of physicality. Hebraically, there are 6 cardinal directions: north, south, east, west, up, down. Everything in our physical realm sits dimensionally within these 6 directions. I don't really have the energy to attack all angles of whether humanness and therefore sinfulness somehow is encapsulated in the number 6. There are some levels of interpretation where that logic can fly, and there are others where it definitely does not. So personally, I am not a fan of using a crowbar to open a door and then presenting it like the crowbar was the right key to use all along. Just because we can open a door doesn't mean that we should walk through that door. And we don't want to enter spaces where we had to force our entry in the first place. The truth is, we can have lots of well-informed theories, but we can't precisely know what or who John was referring to here. Even the grand student of John's, Irenaeus, never mentioned Nero when he wrote extensively about 666. So, identification of the number with a person has had several options ever since the moment John sent his letter to the churches. Now, when talking about the mark of the beast, many identify the mark on the right hand and the mark of the forehead to be some sort of microchip, or otherwise permanent identifier that would be imposed on the masses. Perhaps even without their knowing. But let me point out something important. If you are studying Revelation and you're not constantly jumping back to the Old Testament for related verses and context, you're doing it wrong. Understanding the book of Revelation requires a familiarity with the rest of Scripture. One example of this, among many, is the mention of the mark of the beast on the forehead and on the arm. Where do we find this other places in Scripture? How about Exodus 13:9? And it shall be to you as a sign on your hand and as a memorial between your eyes, that the law of the Lord may be in your mouth. For with a strong hand the Lord has brought you up out of Egypt. Deuteronomy 6:8, you shall bind them as a sign upon your hand, and they shall be for frontlets between your eyes. Deuteronomy 11 in particular sets up this practice as a way to avoid straying after other gods. Verse 16, take care lest your heart be deceived, and you turn aside and serve other gods and worship them. Then the anger of the Lord will be kindled against you, and he will shut up the heavens, and there will be no rain, and the land will yield no fruit, and you will perish quickly off the good land that the Lord is giving you. You shall therefore lay up these words of mine in your heart and in your soul. You shall bind them as a sign on your hands, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. Are we supposed to literally write the words on our hands and on our heads? In Judaism, the practice of laying tefillin is an expression of this command. But even when Deuteronomy 6:8 says, they shall be for frontlets between your eyes, the word is tefillah, which literally means prayer. They are to be a prayer between your eyes. So this could otherwise be interpreted as keeping your deeds, i.e. your hands, and your thoughts, i.e. your prayers, in line with the words of the Lord. If one were to take the mark of the beast on their hands and on their heads, they are likely perpetuating the thoughts and deeds that are evil, the manifestations of the beast. It might as well be said that it doesn't even seem quite right to say that the mark of the beast or the deeds that identify those who follow him are the same as the spirit of the Antichrist. I'll go ahead and point this out now because it's important to note the book of Revelation never uses the term Antichrist. The beast, the dragon, Satan, all are titles that fold in on each other throughout Revelation, but the term Antichrist is not in there. So when people assume, we can use 666 to identify the Antichrist, that's technically incorrect. When someone is attempting to conflate the concept of the Antichrist with the concept of the beast, they have to use theological interpretation, not direct scripture. And the correlation doesn't come from nowhere, but let's be really clear that it is about interpretive correlation, and running rampant with that has led to some major misconceptions. Theological interpretation read about the deceiver and the Antichrist in 2 John 1:7. And then connected it with the beast who deceives those who dwell on earth, Revelation 13:14. Theological interpretation saw the Antichrist who denies the Father and Son, 1 John 2:22, and equated that with the blasphemies of the beast in Revelation 13:6. Theological interpretation saw 1 John 2:18 and 19, and that the spirit of the Antichrist was already present in the world. And it remembered that Revelation 13:7 said the beast was given authority over every tribe and people and language and nation. Revelation 13:7. That's a fair enough way to do a Bible study. But why then would we not immediately think that the moniker of Antichrist or the beast could apply then to, say, the king of Tyre in Ezekiel 28:2? Quote, because your heart is proud, and you have said, I am God, I sit in the seat of gods in the heart of the seas. Yet you are but a man and no God. Aren't there other blasphemers who might then become candidates for anti-Christendom? If the beast title could be assigned to those who check the boxes, then signs and wonders apply, right? So what about Pharaoh's magicians in Exodus 7:11? Then Pharaoh summoned the wise men and the sorcerers, and the magicians of Egypt also did the same by their secret arts, or Simon the sorcerer in Acts 8. If co-equating the Antichrist with the beast of Revelation is substantiated on the ability of a figure to lead the people of God astray from worshiping him, why isn't Jeroboam the number one candidate for the Antichrist? 10 out of 12 tribes followed him into apostasy. So the king took counsel and made 2 calves of gold, and he said to the people, "You have gone up to Jerusalem long enough. Behold your gods, O Israel." 1 Kings 12:28. If you're still with me at this point, I'm going to tell you outright. I'm not going to tell you what you need to think 666 really means. I'm not going to tell you who the Antichrist is or even who I think it is. I think that's entirely beside the point. I could talk to you about being a preterist or a futurist, but I think most people actually sit on a sort of spectrum between the two, and I think arguments could be made to say that the Antichrist was a historical figure that we can identify through scripture or historical accounts, making Nero or Jeroboam or whoever into viable candidates. I think arguments can be made to say that the Antichrist is someone we need to watch out for, and we will be able to identify them in our modern age and in times to come. Personally, I think that's the point of recognizing the spirit of the Antichrist. It embodies many different forms, but it's characterized by the features of its behavior. This video was intended to be an overview of the issue, and I'm sorry if I'm leaving you with more questions than you had at the start, but I wouldn't even have bothered to make a video like this if I didn't have one very important thing to say. Consider that you might want to be less concerned with whoever embodies the spirit of the Antichrist, and start getting a little more worried about how quickly you and those around you embrace the spirit of the accuser. Revelation 12:9 through 10. And the great dragon was thrown down, the ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. And I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, "Now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come. For the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before our God." It is an act of utter madness to embrace the tactics of the enemy when attempting to fight the good fight. If you're concerned about who the Antichrist may be, first, attempt to identify what the Antichrist does. That's a study worth doing. And then when you've got that list of attributes, hang them on your mirror and remind yourself to avoid them. Remind yourself to avoid others who flirt with them. 1, recognize that that person doesn't have to be the Antichrist to do evil. And 2, someone you love, be they someone you know or some famous person you don't, does not get a pass from exhibiting evil behavior just because you love them. The mark of the beast, whether a literal 666 or a currency minted with the likeness of Nero, is never going to be a concern for your heart. Not like it is a concern for your heart to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might, and to write these words on your hand and to let them be for frontlets between your eyes. It is a concern for your heart whether you speak of his word when you sit at home and when you walk on the way, when you lie down, when you rise up, whether they're inscribed on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. You don't need to have a concern for the mark of the beast if you are marked as holy to the Lord. You don't need to worry about who the Antichrist is as long as you know how to shirk all that he does. You don't need to superstitiously avoid the number 666 as long as you know that there are plenty of other ways to prudently avoid the unholy actions and thoughts that are claimed by evil people who don't follow the Lord. Love one another. Pursue peace. Seek truth. And I will leave you with 2 Timothy 2:23, have nothing to do with foolish and ignorant controversies. You know that they breed quarrels. Hope you learned something. Have a good one. Bye.